I clicked on the other link and it didn't work, so I've gone back to it using the ID and passcode.
Okay, we're now on YouTube.
Thank you, Ben. Well, good evening, and thank you very much for attending tonight's Education, Skills and Employment EAP meeting. Welcome you all, and can I wish you all a happy new year as well. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies from members, Chair.
Okay, so we have one vacancy at the moment. So we have appointed that vacancy yesterday, and so they will be joining. Councillor Ian Jelly will be joining us at the next EAP as well. And I also would like to welcome the members from Rushden for tonight's meeting to discuss the proposed amalgamation of Tennyson Road and Alfred Street solely for that purpose only. After that, you will be removed from the meeting. So thank you very much for attending. Also at 6:15, we have a meeting on levelling up. If we've not finished before that, then we will attend that meeting as well. If you could attend that if you can, please. Okay, so item 3 is the declarations of interest. Do we have any? No, perfect, thank you. So item 4 is the proposed amalgamation of Tennyson Road Infant and Alfred Street Junior Schools in Rushden. And I'd like to ask Anne-Marie, please, to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. So this report covers, as Councillor Edwards has said, the proposed amalgamation of Tennyson Road and Alfred Street. Just to summarise, there are a number of issues, both operationally and financially, that are impacting upon the long-term success of Tennyson Road and Alfred Street. They're contained within the report. What we have to do is, if we are proposing an amalgamation, and to be clear that we've been approached by the governing bodies from both schools in March 21 to see if we could progress in a potential amalgamation, what we have to do if we are following that route is follow a very prescribed Department for Education process of consultation that we follow to determine whether or not the schools amalgamate or otherwise. The reason for the consultation is to ensure that everybody, all interested parties, are able to share their views, their concerns, their understanding, test their understanding, and have time to properly consider the options here. So in summary, what I'm recommending, or will be recommending to exec, is that exec support the proposed consultation, so that we can start on our journey to determine whether this is something that we would want to undertake or otherwise. We would also then further down the line, and that's not for now, we would need to understand, should the decision, and that's not closed, but should the decision be taken to amalgamate these two schools, then we will be in another series of conversations and questions that again we would need to consult upon as to what the proposed site of any amalgamated school might look like. But we're not at that stage yet because we haven't gone through the consultation about the amalgamation. So it seems like a very long and a very drawn out process, and I appreciate there will be councillors on the call who have seen this proposal in the past and are wondering and trying to understand why we are back in the same spaces that you've probably been through previously. Our concern as officers are that there are financial challenges to both schools. The admission numbers are falling. Depending on who you listen to, you would be told that this is about challenges on whether the schools will amalgamate or not, and uncertainty for parents. Many people have many views as to why the pupil admission numbers have fallen with the schools. But that doesn't distract from the fact that we have officers working, financial colleagues working with both schools on both the finances and also on the performance improvement. I think probably most of what I've said is covered in the report. We do have an option, of course, to do nothing, which is always the case. But I'm happy to take questions because I know that colleagues on the call feel quite strongly about this and probably have more questions that they would prefer answered, Chair, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much. And first up is Dorothy.
Good evening. My questions are obviously, I will be honest, I've done a lot of research looking into both these schools, and I have massive concerns over what's happened. So to start off with, my question is, why is it taking 10 years to get to this point? Then looking at it, I've helped both these schools actually, outside schools, with setting up activities for them. So I'm quite familiar with them. But my next question is, were the head teachers informed of this process which you're now proposing? My next question is that, looking at the Ofsted reports, it says that sadly, obviously COVID couldn't have helped, but both schools are in special measures. Now that could be because of the uncertainty facing both schools, but also because over 10 years, that's a long time. And the question's got to be is, why is this actually come about? And obviously from a parent's point of view, they'll be thinking to themselves over the last 10 years, well, are they going to shut? Are they not going to shut? How they're going to go forward? And then looking at assessments of, which is something that we've looked at before, but looking at assessments of children with special educational needs, the good news is we're now employed 12 people, but have all these children which need special educational needs been assessed? Because once they get assessed, as we know, then they get funding.
We are just talking about the amalgamation of the two schools.
Yeah, I realise that.
Yeah,
So,
I think you've drifted into another topic.
Yeah.
Right, okay, fine. But so my questions are, right, given falling numbers could be, has created uncertainty. My next question is, are the head teachers involved in this? You know, are they aware of what's going on? And the way forward, which is a positive thing, if it's taken 10 years to get to this point, are we then going to make sure financially that these children needs are going to be met following the actual layout of the consultation period, which will end in July of this year?
Thank you, Dorothy. Anne-Marie, I think there's a series of questions there. Are you okay to answer those?
Yeah, of course, Chair. I'll try and answer them. First of all, Councillor Maxwell, in terms of why has this taken 10 years, I've got absolutely no idea. I couldn't possibly try to answer that. I wasn't party to any conversations with the local authority before April of last year. I do appreciate that this has gone round a loop a number of times, but in terms of a commentary on that, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment.
Okay.
Are the head teachers aware? Yes, of course. We are working with the head teachers and the governing bodies of both schools. I, in fact, myself have met with the chairs of governors from both of the schools, and assured from my colleagues in the school improvement team, and Jo Hutchinson will join us on the call when she's finished. She's in a school at the minute, but I'm sure Jo can pick up some of those if she manages to join us in time. Yes, the heads are aware. You did mention, I think, just for the sake of the record, Chair, if I might, Councillor Maxwell said both schools were in special measures. In fact, paragraph 4.4 of the report confirms that both schools are requires improvement. So that's not special measures really.
No, I realise that. Sorry, I got that
Yeah.
wrong. I apologise.
And can I give any assurance that financially the needs of children will be met if we proceed with an amalgamation? I think if we proceed with an amalgamation, it gives financially the best chance of survival for both of these schools. I wouldn't want to preempt any decisions around DFE funding to the schools, or in fact the recovery position of an amalgamated school or separate schools going forward, because I think given that we get dedicated school grant settlements year on year, it's impossible to say what the long-term financial viability of any school would be.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that last bit that you just mentioned? Given the fact that, am I allowed to?
Yes.
Given that you're saying about the DFE funding criteria, would Northants Council have to apply on behalf of the schools for funding to ensure that they are going to get it until July 2022? Would that have to be done by Northants Council, or would the schools actually apply for it?
I'm not sure what funding you're referring
Well,
to.
I was thinking about, so at the moment, each school gets a budget, which they then have to manage, and which is tight, very tight, because obviously with the school numbers been reduced, they don't get the same income as they would have done had they got, full quota in the school. However, given the fact the tightness of the budget at the present, would we as a council ensure Northants Council, for example, that there is funding so that these children don't miss out on the curriculum side of things, which clearly could be an issue, so they don't, until a decision's made in July 2022, could we ensure that the funding criteria meets the needs of the children? And I'm talking about, they have special needs children as well as able children. Can we make sure that the funding stays put and it doesn't hinge on the head teachers trying to run around trying to find extra funding?
Okay, so a couple of points, and then I will hand over to my colleague Neil, who might want to add more context to this. So first of all, when schools are operating in a deficit position, what we don't do is just stop funding the school, because obviously we have children in there who need to be educated. What we find is we find ourselves in a deficit position then with the school's budget. What we have to do then is we have to work with the school and we work with the Department for Education to ensure that we put in a financial recovery plan to rebalance that school's budget. Now, what we absolutely won't do is just stop supporting the school for the school to run to educate the pupils. But what we can't do is we can't persist with a problem where schools are in deficit without taking remedial action to balance that budget. And I don't know whether Neil would want to pick up or add anything to what I've just said. Neil, if that's all right with you, Chair.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and good afternoon, colleagues. My name's Neil Goddard. I'm the Interim Assistant Director of Education now for the North. It's good to meet you all. I would only add that the funding for schools is, as you're very aware, formula driven through the national funding formula that the DFE set, and schools would absolutely not miss out from that through the process that we're going through. Depending on the outcome of the consultation, the route by which we establish a combined school will have impacts on how the finances are managed. But I think that's a conversation for then rather than now. And as Anne-Marie says, we are absolutely in support of schools when they're in a deficit position to continue to meet the needs of children, but also to come back over a period of time into a balanced budget position. So that would continue with, you know, financial support and guidance over that period of time to come to a position. And as Anne-Marie says, you know, a school with a larger school with more pupils in it invariably becomes more financially resilient, as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, am I allowed to ask a second question to you, Neil?
I'm just going to pass over to some of the other members,
sorry.
Dorothy, but you may come back after that. Okay.
Right, okay.
Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. The suggestion that this has taken 10 years to reach this point is incorrect. It's taken 30 years.
30.
The first suggestions of merging these schools was back in the 90s. Back in the noughties, when I was leader of East Northants Council and the county councillor for this area, I tried very hard to get the two schools to merge. The head teacher at Alfred Street School stonewalled me and did his best to block it. There were also a number of governors at Alfred Street who didn't want to merge. There's a very strong resilience amongst ex-pupils of Alfred Street who want to keep it there for historic reasons. For those who don't know, the school was hit by a bomb during the Second World War, and a number of pupils were killed, and it is still a very emotional subject amongst a number of people who were either there at the time or shortly before or after. Today, we've got less pressure from that generation because a lot of them have died off, to be blunt, and that's why this has finally reached the point where we're actually going to get some movement on it. It has been a no-brainer, in my opinion, that the two schools should merge for a very long time. When Alfred Street School was built, it was probably the centre of the population area for Rushton West. But over the centuries more and more since then, that part of Rushton has become largely depopulated as it's become commercial, and the Rushton has grown to the west, and now the catchment area for the two schools is at least a mile to the west of Alfred Street. As a result, most of the pupils that go to Alfred Street School have to walk down a steep hill, cross several major
roads.
Right. I think Andy has frozen.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me?
We can now, Andy.
Right. Oh dear.
We got to crossing major roads.
Right, I'll turn off my video because it's causing problems, so I'm just speaking, okay? I'll turn it back on again afterwards. Right, the children are having to walk typically a mile and have to cross several major and dangerous roads. Also, there are no adequate facilities for parents to do dropping off, which is particularly important for special education needs children. They can't just be expected to walk a mile on their own to get to the school. But thirdly, there is the point that whenever a child changes school, it loses some of its education time. It's typically estimated it puts back a child by about 6 months. So if you merge the schools, you don't have that loss, which in turn will help schools which need improvement because they'll have that extra 6 months boost. Now, on top of that, the Alfred Street School is isolated from its, well, as I said, from its population, which goes as far away as Macefield Road, where we're talking about nearly 2 miles away along a major road. That is just not sensible. The site at Tennyson Road in particular can be expanded. We've already done this once. Alfred Street School during the 90s did not have enough curtilage. So the county council compulsorily purchased half the car park owned by East Northamptonshire Council and converted it into grounds for the school. There was a major dispute between the two councils about it. Now, this time round, we could do the same thing if we needed to at Tennyson Road, if we decided to merge on that site, because we already own the car park immediately behind it and it's not fully utilised. So we could do the same trick there as we did at Alfred Street and thereby increase the curtilage of the school if it needed to be. So as far as I can see, we have very good reason to merge the two schools. It will save costs, it will give better outcomes for the children, and it will be safer. And what's more, we have the opportunity, because the site at Tennison Road can be expanded to take both sets of pupils. Now, this is especially important because, as has been pointed out, the admissions rate has dropped significantly. I'm not surprised about this, to be honest, because a lot of the properties that are in the catchment area are now reaching the stage where the average age of residents is increasing past the point where they have children. So the number of children coming from that area was inevitably going to fall. And it's likely to, in my opinion, that it will drop to one where you can only support a single form entry. Under those circumstances, it seems to me to be a no-brainer to merge the two schools and have a single right through school till 11. It will give better outcomes for the kids, it will be safer, and it will save money.
Thank you, Andy. David.
Thanks, Scott. I'll be brief. I totally agree with everything that Andy said, and there's quite a few other bits that could be put in. What I would like to know, just to be absolutely certain, what the recommendation is coming to executive. Could somebody please tell me what that is?
Yeah, so the recommendation is that we go out to consultation to merge the schools or do nothing.
Is that to merge the schools on a particular site?
No. So that's what the consultation will then pick up, what people's opinions are on which site is better to be merged with which site or not at all. Because obviously the option is always there, you know, not to merge it at all.
Well, I will be arguing at executive then for a merger on the Tennison Road School site, because to my mind, that is the only sensible, viable option.
Okay, so the first,
Dave,
just to make sure that the first consultation is really about, are we merging the two schools? The second consultation will then be about which school merges with which. So yeah, absolutely. So your point there will come into the second consultation.
Well, I'm sad that we need two consultations to get to the point where we need to be, but okay, if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say also that I agree with everything that Andy, Councillor Mercer has said, because at the time, no more than that, between 10 and 20 years ago, I was a member of the Governors and also the chairman of Governors. And the biggest objectives were both the head teachers of both schools, particularly the one from Alfred Street. And you may all recall that we had the crossing patrols and then the county withdrew it. Well, when that happened, John Kidney, the headmaster of Alfred Street School, rang me up, tried to persuade us otherwise to keep them, and then said to me, and I think he wrote to me, to say that if any child was injured or killed on the main road near the school, I'd have blood on my hands. That's the sort of headmaster he was. But I do have a question, and that is, if both the schools were closed down for various reasons, would we have the capacity with the juniors and infant school in Rushton to accommodate those pupils?
So I don't think there is a proposal to shut both schools.
Well, it's in the pages, a possibility.
I don't think that, Anne-Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the proposal is there to shut both schools. It's either do nothing or merge.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. We're talking about either the amalgamation of both schools. There is a question, and I think Neil wants to come in. There's a question about reducing the pupil numbers in those schools to make sure that they continue to be viable and they're doing what they need to do for the number of pupils. But there's absolutely no proposal to close both schools. And I think Neil wanted to come in. Thanks, Neil.
If that's okay, Chair, I'll just
Can I
comment
come
on
back,
that.
Chair, for a second? Just very quickly, One of the reasons why it didn't go any farther years ago was because it went out to consultation to the parents at that time, and many of them objected to it. So,
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
thanks for that. Yeah, Neil, if you'd like to continue, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say on the subject of closing of the schools, of course, the paper does talk about how you facilitate a merger, which could be that you close one school and merge towards the other school, or that you could potentially close both schools and start a new school. What there isn't a proposal to do is close both schools and not have a new school. It's just the route by which you merge. Like I say, it could be that you close one or either school and merge on into that school, or you close both schools and have an entirely new school. And once again, that's entirely in line with the DFE recommended route through these sorts of consultations to ensure all possibilities have had the chance to be aired and people can have their say on all those. But just to reiterate really what Anne-Marie was saying, there's not a proposal to shut both schools and not reopen a school. It would be to shut both schools with the aim to, then facilitate an entirely new school that wasn't based on either of the two preceding schools, and that would be all. So hopefully that clarifies what the paper is referring to when it speaks to the closures.
Superb, thank you, Neil. Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Other people have said quite a few of the things I was going to say. I agree that it's a no-brainer, the two schools merging, and that there's obviously the report lays out the reasons why, and that's very clear. And I have a couple of questions. I think you probably more or less answered them, but in the report it says about the consultation 26th of May to 23rd of June. I'm assuming that's the one where the new site will be. The second question I have is, it mentions about reducing the numbers. I just wonder by how much, and obviously that's going to have a knock-on effect to other schools as well. So I know they're falling roles, but they're talking about, say, 30 from each school, so it's 60 altogether. How far off that are they currently? And I just wondered also, has there ever been, or as an interim perhaps in the moment, is it says, I think it's at 7.14, that the senior roles, merging the senior roles is obviously going to save money, and that's sort of ultimately what will happen on a merged school. But has there been any thought to doing that as an interim? Because I was involved when Hayway merged with Denfield School, and I know that happened perhaps for a year beforehand, where they just went under a single head. So I just wondered that. But overall, I think if you merge on one site, I think it's going to help with our green, carbon footprint, etc. Because having people, I mean, unless they're walking, which of course, we would hope they would, that having the school closer to their home would obviously mean that they could walk, but it would also mean that they're not using their car and using fossil fuels. So I think merging the two schools is really helpful, but I just wonder if you could answer those couple of questions.
Thank you, Jill. Anne-Marie, I can see you've
I'll start, and then Neil or Jill might want to jump in. Just to confirm that the reduction in the pupil admission numbers, or PAN, that you might hear it spoken of, it's not as exciting as Peter Pan, but if we're reducing the PAN, so the pupil admission numbers, the number that we propose to reduce to is still greater than the number of admission requests we get for those schools at present. So there is no question in there that we're placing pressure on other schools or failing to provide the provision in that area for parents and for children, is the first part. And then, forgive me, Councillor Mercer, what was your second question?
Well, there was about the dates. It was the 26th of May to the 23rd of June. That's presumably the second part of the second consultation. Does it? Does it have to be, I mean, you've got the publication of the statutory notice, 26th of May, that's after an exec decision, and then the second consultation.
So the timeline that is in there, so for colleagues, 7.5.2, that table in there follows the DFE process that we have to go through in line with the DFE timelines for each one of those separate parts of the consultation. So that's essentially just allowing you to understand, once we embark on that, assuming an executive agree, once we embark on that consultation, that DFE process, they're the key timelines and key deadlines throughout that process.
And the third question was about the merging of the senior roles and whether that could be started in advance of a formal merger.
Okay, so we are duty bound, as I said earlier, and Jill might want to say a little bit more about this in a moment, but we're duty bound to look at the deficit or financial recovery model with our colleagues in the school, the governors there and the DFE, to look to see how we might balance the books. Now, at this stage, we're not ruling anything out, and if it's something that we thought was going to assist us and it was something that both schools were open to, then we will consider it. I think it's really important to say at this stage that we are working with finance colleagues and school effectiveness colleagues with both schools to ensure the practice within those schools and the quality of education for the children is as good as it can be and is improving, and also that the financial position that the schools are in, we're working hard to recover the deficit and essentially the overspend on those schools. But we wouldn't rule anything out, nor would we determine here or determine unilaterally as a local authority what was in the best interest of those schools, because we are working very hard to work with the governing bodies of those schools and work with the head teachers of those schools to ensure that they feel that they are, you know, leading and driving this, and they have an equal stake within the improvement and the stability of those schools for their children as we do. I don't know, Joe or Neil, whether you want to come in there.
Well, I'll just comment from a procedural basis that, you know, if we were to go down the route of shared senior staff or move towards a federation, perhaps a soft or a hard federation or some other route between the two schools, there is a process and a DFE-led process behind that as well. That will take time. So we have to, it's difficult to twin track, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that, you know, we're following this path for the reasons Anne-Marie has set out. Exactly as Anne-Marie said, we're not ruling anything out, but doing things in the interim is quite difficult given the DFE processes that support any changes to the operation and management of schools. But, you know, just to underline again, we're not ruling anything out. It's just this is the proposal that's come forward at the moment. And as we've said, that broader view of the financial position of each school is one element of those things that's taken us to this point, and something to be considered. But your point is well made, that there are alternative routes to looking at working differently that we could consider if this was not the right way forward for us at this point in time, following consultation and discussion at this board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks all. Yeah, so as has been said, on the face of it, the amalgamation does seem sensible. In fact, it'd be hard to argue against it when the governing bodies are requesting it themselves. But I got three short questions really. With regards to the consultation itself, I presume that isn't something that's particularly expensive, but do we know what the likely cost is, and how is the cost of that covered? Does it come, do NNC directly pay for it, or does it come from schools' existing budgets? Because presumably somebody has to cover the cost and the overhead. Secondly, and notwithstanding the outcome of the consultation, is there anything specifically beneficial about closing the two schools, opening, presumably building a new one, but thereby getting a fresh Ofsted report? So is there anything beneficial to doing that? And then lastly, do NNC own the buildings, the two school buildings at the moment? And Andy talked about the car park, but do we own the buildings? Because presumably if they were closed, they could or would be sold to fund the building of a new one or expanding one of the existing ones. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I'll start on that, and then I'm going to hand over in terms of anything beneficial to Neil. So in terms of the consultation, obviously it's a consultation that we would be leading as officers from NNC, and therefore, you know, the costs associated with carrying out that consultation will fall to us, and the local authority wouldn't fall individually to each of the schools, because it's the consultation that we're leading. I have to admit, I don't know whether NNC own those buildings. I don't know, given how new my colleagues are to Northamptonshire, whether we're clear on that either. Jo might know, because I think she's the old hand at this, and she'll probably not forgive me for saying that. And then for your middle question, Councillor Wicks, in terms of beneficial in the new school, I'll hand over to Neil, because he's greater technical expertise on this than I.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm not sure benefit is quite the right word. There are different implications, if you like. So if you were to shut both schools, at the moment, the regulations would suggest that if you were to open a new school, it would have to be an academy. That's the rules of, you know, how the DfE operates.
Sorry, Neil, it would have to be what? You broke up for a second there.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, like as I was saying, that I'm not sure it's a benefit, but there are different implications. Okay, so if you were to close both schools, then at the moment the regulations would imply that any new school open, and that's any new school, would be an academy. Okay, so that's something we'd have to talk to the DfE about and what that meant. Whereas if you were to close one school and merge into the other, and of course they're currently maintained schools, then that would retain the status that it currently has. But there's a lot of work to be done about that in terms of consultation with the DfE as to what that would look like, and how they would want us to manage that. More generally, if you were to, where you close schools, you obviously close down the accounts, and so there is no continuation of any surplus or deficit type thing. So you're starting with a fresh sheet of paper, usually with a new name, you know, a new uniform, all the things that go along with it. And sometimes the community are very positive about that it's a fresh start, you know, and there's a lot to be said for that. But sometimes not. Sometimes, you know, the schools are, you know, very well embedded in the community, and there's a lot of loyalty to the school and the uniform and everything that goes with it, and you want to carry on with that. So it's not a straightforward conversation, and there are implications to doing it either way, I would suggest. So I'm not sure there's a direct benefit of one or the other. There are just different implications, if that's clear enough.
Yeah, well, that does make sense. The Chairman, could I just come back and
Absolutely. Yep.
So just going back to the consultation. So that's thanks, Anne-Marie. So NNC cover the cost. That makes perfect sense. Of course, why would it be the schools? Do we have any idea? I mean, presumably that has to be budgeted for. It's a service. It's something that's got to be carried out. But I'm just trying to get a feel for what is that? Where does that money come from? Is it somewhere in the existing budget?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Lee. Anne-Marie?
Sorry, Anne-Marie, did you want me to comment on that?
Yeah, go on, Neil.
So school organisation is a key role of the local authority. So we have budgets set aside for school organisational type issues. So if we were to consult on a new school, or consult on closing a school, consult on academisation, all those sorts of things. So it comes from that budget. So it's an existing budget that's funded within the council. And so it can be managed within, certainly at the starting point, as you say, the consultation itself is not an expensive operation to undertake, and very usual for school organisation type work. So I would say that's something that would certainly be covered from an existing school organisation budget, because we do that all the time, just with different focus as we move forward. If we move forward into a full amalgamation or whatever it might look like, there may be costs in terms of the second consultation, public meetings and other things that we wouldn't otherwise run. And we'd have to have a conversation about that following the outcome of this decision. But like I say, I think we have some opportunity to shape that. And we do have budgets because, like I say, school organisation is a very key element of what the council does all the time, every year. This is just a different facet of that. And like I say, one consultation will very easily fit within that budget, I think it's fair to say.
Answered perfectly, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Philip next because he hasn't asked a question yet.
Thank you very much. First, my apologies for wearing what appears to be a sports top. I had to come straight from work and didn't have time to change. So apologies for the seeming informality. Just a couple of questions really about how the consultation is going to be, particularly in relation to page 12 of my hard copy notes, item 4.14. A steering group's been set up already. Partly just curious as to that a steering group has already been set up to assist in decision making before any consultations taking place. I would have thought you'd consult first because people might say over my dead body, no, you're not going to do it, so forget it. I mean, but although obviously I'm not assuming that's going to be the answer, but there is a steering group. Is that steering group going to be the one deciding on the questions in the initial consultation to stakeholders, or are the questions to stakeholders standard ones provided by the DFE? I'd be interested to know that because how you question people can obviously affect your final decision. I'd also be interested to just for clarification, how finally will the recommendation, assuming there is one, be made? Is it the steering group will recommend to this committee, or the steering group will recommend to the education department, or the education department will listen to the steering group, or will ask the steering group what's the results of the consultation? I don't quite see. I'd just like to know how the decision ultimately will be presented, or the recommendation will be presented to executive on the basis of what, who is going to go through the consultations, etc.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. So first of all, the steering group is a group that's been largely driven by the chairs of governors and the staff from both of the schools. It has been supported by officers from the local authority. So I know Joe has been an advisor to that steering group. That steering group has largely at this stage been around some of the challenges that both of those schools have independently and collectively. And actually what it is, it's almost like a working group. The steering group is the title that's been given to it. It's almost like a working group that is assisting both schools deal with some of those issues that they've got day to day as they're in performance improvement scenarios, or when they're in deficit budgets, to find out collectively how they can work together to address some of those problems. They will also be, it's a benefit, should executive take the decision that these schools will amalgamate. It's a group that's already got an identity and an ethos of working together that will assist them when they have to go through some of those transactional HR or the transactional financial arrangements to change any potential working arrangements going forward. So they are not, they're not a decision-making body on this. The exec will make the decision around the amalgamation. It's really important, however, that we have the support of the schools, and that is a mechanism by which we can communicate with the schools and keep the schools fully informed about the position. So we would feedback, for example, it may well be that they're on YouTube right now watching and understanding about our conversation so that they understand the full context of what is going on. And we have encouraged that steering group and representatives from both governing bodies and the head teachers of both schools to view our conversation today to help them understand that actually there is a much broader context around an amalgamation. And it is the decision of exec further down the line about what will ultimately happen here. So we just want to make sure that we're making this process as transparent as possible, and that all parties feel like they can fully engage with all elements of the decision making and the process. Anything, Neil or Joe, you want to add to that?
I need to pick up on, I think, your first part of your question about the nature of the consultation. I think it's for us to write the consultation in order that it best reflects the proposal that we're putting forward in a way that the consultees understand it and are able to express their views as clearly as possible. I don't think there's a DFE set of questions, but they will scrutinise us to ensure that it's a full and fair consultation and that it is representative of, or gives the opportunity for those who wish to express a view. So like I said, I don't think it's a set of questions, but I do think we will get scrutinised to ensure they're a full and fair representation of what we're putting forward.
Okay, if I could just follow up, Chairman, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Now, it was earlier said that the consultation will be in multiple parts. First part, essentially, should the schools amalgamate? And the second part is, where should they be? I mean, I think, I would imagine that any stakeholder being asked, should the schools amalgamate, would immediately say, well, it depends where. Can you not do the site consultation at the same time? Present it as a series of options, because there are a limited number of options after all.
You posed a great question, Councillor Owen. I think it is what we wanted to do in going through this consultation. We acknowledge and we appreciate, first of all, that these conversations have been had in the past. And indeed, your colleagues on the call have noted when these conversations have previously been had, but essentially not concluded, or concluded that there is no change. What we didn't want to do was to mix a number of issues here, and what we wanted to do was break this down into quite distinct elements of a long-term solution. And actually the first and most pressing conversation for us in terms of the long-term sustainability of education in Rushton for these children is, do we or don't we amalgamate, and what that amalgamation looks like, which is the fine detail that Neil described. The risk, having had conversations with officers, the risk for us was, if we are consulting on, if we amalgamate, this is where we may or may not be cited, we felt that would muddy the conversation or cloud the conversation about should there be an amalgamation. And it was, of course, we will be guided by exec about sequencing and timing of any subsequent decisions. But from an officer point of view, our absolute priority is the long-term sustainability of those schools in whatever form, and that's the part within the DFE direction that we want to get on that route, and we want to get on that journey. And we didn't want to either preempt a decision by exec suggesting that communities may or may not want to amalgamate. So really, I can appreciate the question as to, people will say yes, amalgamate, or don't amalgamate, depending on where the school is. But actually, the amalgamation is not driven by location. The amalgamation is driven by a financial and a practice imperative for both schools for different reasons to get this right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Leanne as well next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Philip asked many of the questions I wanted to ask in terms of, what does consultation look like? I did see that there was a steering group, and I was acutely aware that potentially this is a cohort of people that actually are very pro to the change, and therefore are we going to get the full voice? But I hear that there is going to be wider work, and hopefully wider conversations. So not just, sorry about that, something's happening around the corner. A wider conversation that kind of explore the challenges, not just ask the questions, because obviously cultural change sometimes and for homes and families is quite difficult. Looking at the risks associated, it makes absolute sense that this has to be an amalgamation for me, but I'm acutely aware I'm not a parent delivering my children to the school. I mean, when you're looking at the very last point in terms of the risks, the impact on children's level of attainment would be at a detriment for transitioning into a different school with a different ethos and a way the culture is delivered, curriculum is delivered. I think it makes it makes absolute sense that we would be going for it. And thank you very much, Philip, for already touching on most of those points.
Thank you, Leanne. Okay, so we're going to move back to Dorothy.
Well, I have two further questions. I feel that the head teachers have to be really part of whatever decisions are actually made, or in view of the consultation. However, as it stands at the moment, the curriculum for these children has been hampered by the lack of the actual classrooms as they stand at the moment, because I've been in both these schools, means that it doesn't actually meet the whole curriculum. So, for example, if you looked at IT or science or technology, they're just not there. On the other hand, when you're looking at the future, we know, those people who live in Rushden, which I am one of them, that there's a proposal of 500 houses which are going to be built in Rushden at some point, along with other houses in the future. So I think that we must be mindful of the fact that building a new school would mean that you would also meet the curriculum, which at the moment it's not meeting. And I think that when you're looking at the consultation, it has to be so that the parents realise the benefits of how their views are seriously taken into consideration, and they're not just a side entrance to this. And it's no good just saying, oh, well, some of these parents only live locally. They don't. Parents will vote with their feet. I'm involved with Southend Infant School. I teach there voluntary when I'm allowed to. And I know that parents do vote with their feet. I think these schools, sadly, in a way, if I was honest, have been let down. I think we should have done this 10 years ago, or even, as Andy said, 30 years ago. The schools themselves are extremely old. And I'm not being nasty about it, they are. And so I think what I'm asking is, when we look at it, can we make sure that whatever's decided, that in the consultation, it gives some aspects of the benefits of having either a new school or changing this perspective so that the children get a full education and also become successful.
Thank you, Dorothy. Sorry, Anne-Marie. And I think actually, I think you're right, Dorothy, and I think the consultation will be as open and transparent as we possibly can, and will include all those options, and it will give everybody to have their say and their point of view. Parents, counsellors, local residents, former parents, everybody. And I think absolutely that's what a consultation should be, and that's what I'm hoping Anne-Marie is just going to confirm.
It's exactly what I was going to confirm. Thank you, Chair. But also, I think Councillor Maxwell, by way of some assurance, I think that we are familiar with what is happening in the school in terms of curriculum. Jo is doing a lot of work with both schools, and Jo's team are doing a lot of work with both schools. And I'm sure she would want to comment on the school curriculum for both Tennyson Road and Alfred Street to offer councillors some assurance that we are working with those schools. So Jo, on curriculum.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Yes, in both schools and the work that we're doing with them, there is a full and comprehensive curriculum being offered to all of the children at this moment in time. So, and that's what we understand by the work that we're doing in both of those schools at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Jo. David.
Thanks, Scott, again. Nobody has answered Lee's questions about ownership, so I will. All of the Tennyson Road site is owned by the former or came across from NCC. The car parking in the Pemberton Centre came from ENC, and the Pemberton Centre is run as an NNC facility now. As far as the Alfred Street site is concerned, ENC owns the vast swathes of the land from those of you who probably know Caesar's Pizzeria, all the way through to the far side of the splash pool. It is a piece of land that we have been, as ENC, have been jealously guarding, knowing that NNC was coming along to give us the major opportunity for regeneration in Rushton. And we were aware that when NCC finished, the Alfred Street site would become part of that. So I'll just say this to members tonight. We've been talking very carefully and very correctly about making the right decision for the children, and I absolutely totally applaud that. But in the background also there is the right decision that has to be made for NNC. Yeah. And that is, there's a major opportunity for us to secure the financial stability the years to come for the Unitary Council. So please do not forget that. That's why Philip Irwin's question about how the consultation is worded is so important. We have to get this right, but we have got to get it right for the whole of the unitary area.
Thank you, David. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. My question is probably directed to Neil as much as anyone. You mentioned about a federation with the two schools, possibly in the future, but is there a potential for it to become an academy? And if so, if it became academy, if it does so, would they have to provide funding of some description in terms of sponsorship?
Okay, so I'm going to try not to muddy the waters with the academisation issue, because clearly it's a big issue within the education context at the moment. And so it's a good question to ask, but I don't want to go too far down that route because I think it might distract us from the issue at hand. I'll just do the first part of the question. So federation is two schools working formally together in one form or another, which would really be instead of amalgamation, really, because like I said, there's a process to be gone through to get to that point, and we wouldn't twin track, we would do one or the other, and they'd probably stay on two sites with one head and one governing body and those sorts of things. So that's an alternative, but that's not the focus of our consultation. Academisation, well, we know the government's policy on academisation, so any new schools, as I said earlier, if both schools were to shut and we were to say we want to open a new one on either site or a new site, whichever, would most likely be an academy. If we were to merge one school into the other, closing one and keeping the other, it can maintain its status, so maintain community school. Would there be pressure for the schools to become an academy generally? Well, the national policy, if schools continue to be RI, or if schools fall into special measures, then there will be very direct questions about the benefits of academisation and whether that would lead to improvements in the outcomes for children and young people. So what we're doing in looking to improve the outcomes within one of the schools, most likely, is alongside of that academisation. So it wouldn't necessarily lead to an academisation question, only if the schools were not to be successful over a long period of time, which of course, thanks to the work that Jo and her team are doing and everyone at the school, we very much hope wouldn't be the case. So I don't think we'd come under pressure, if that's your question, to academise as part of the merger, unless we were to close both schools. And sorry, that's quite a long answer. I hope I got the.
That's all right. It's just I'd like to add a comment. I happen to know a couple of the teachers, or were teachers down there until recently at Alfred Street, and the two schools did operate as a federation not so long ago, and they thought it was very successful.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And finally, Andy.
Thanks, Chair. If I freeze again, please accept my apologies. I don't think the idea of a federation is going to actually solve the problems that we've got, namely that the catchment area does not match where the school, Alfred Street School in particular, is, and making children have to make unnecessary journeys to get to school, and particularly a problem for parents who've got children at both schools, because then they have to deliver children to both different schools. What I wanted to raise was a separate issue, and that is that at Rushden East is in development, 2,700 homes with at least one school there. That will change the pattern of the catchment areas, and it will do so to the detriment of Alfred Street School as it currently stands, because it will be on that side of the town, and it will draw more pupils away that side, so that there will be even fewer admissions in, say, 5-8 years' time for Alfred Street School if it stays as an independent school separate from a merged school. So with that development on the horizon, if you like, we've got something chasing us up saying we've got to solve this problem before that happens. It should have been solved 30 years ago, but it's getting more urgent as developments occur.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you very much, everybody, for all your contributions towards this. And I look forward to the next stage. I'd like to thank Andy and Michael, David and Jill. Thank you, Jill, for coming along. And we're going to continue with the rest of the meeting. We're just going to remove you first. But thank you very much for coming along.
Thank
you very much for the invite.
Yeah, good night, everyone.
Just wait 1 second. That's fine. Thank you very much for that, everybody. So we move on to the next item, which is the determination of admission arrangements for local authority maintained schools for the 2023 intakes. Anne-Marie, is it you?
I think it's me, Chair. I think I'm going to take this item.
You want to say something?
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether we did approve the minutes. Did we? Apologies if I missed it.
Yeah, okay. Can I approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December?
From my point of view, yes. I just thought we had.
Thank you. No, absolutely. Policies and procedure, Philip. Thank you. Okay, yes. So we move back on. And Neil, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an annual report that members who've been involved with education for some years will be used to seeing, and has 3 parts to it. We're required to set the admission arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools. So that's the admissions policy, and in particular the policy where there's oversubscription, where more parents or more pupils apply to a school than they're able to accommodate, and so the order in which they are admitted to the school. So that's one part of the paper before you. The second part is about coordinated admissions. So local authorities are able but not required to coordinate in-year admissions, which means if a parent wants to request a school place outside of the normal point of admission, which is obviously in September as the school year moves on, as a result of moving in or some other set of circumstances, rather than applying directly to the school, they can apply to the local authority, and the local authority will coordinate that admission. So they can select three preferences of the school they might select, and the local authority consults with those schools on their behalf and then makes them one offer, which is obviously much more efficient than the parent having to apply to individual schools individually. And there's a coordinated plan that sits behind that, and that's the second part of the paper before you is approving the coordinated admission arrangements for North Northants. I should say within that not all schools are not required to partake in that, and they can require parents to apply directly to them. So it's an offer rather than a requirement. The final part of the paper is about what's called the relevant area, and that's about consultation. So that's about when you're talking about a school, what are the relevant organisations and the area around that school with which you consult. And that was obviously, as set out in the paper, the North Northants area and those areas outside of that which are adjacent to it and likely to be impacted by any changes to school admission or other arrangements. So the proposal before you is that the admission arrangements are changed only very marginally. The one school has requested that they insert a line to give some priority to pupils of staff, and we looked at that and we don't believe it will have a significant impact on the intake from the local community now or into the future. So we think that's a reasonable request and something other schools have done. Other than that, the admission arrangements remain very similar to what they are at the moment. Once again, the coordinated admission arrangements are very similar to those that we had this year and worked successfully. And the relevant area, once again, is that we used previously, split out obviously for the North Northants area from the broader Northamptonshire. So that's the paper before you. It's not suggesting any significant change. It's really a continuation. There has been consultation, and you'll see the output of the consultation noted in the paper as we go through. And there weren't any objections raised to the proposals that were put forward. And so we present it to you for your consideration.
Thank you, Neil. Just a quick question for me. Are there many schools that opt out of it?
You'll have to excuse me being new and not knowing the exact answer to that. There are a number. I know there are a number, but I could tell you that I could find out the number and let you know, but I don't know the exact number. I'm really sorry.
No, sorry, Neil. Sorry for putting you on the spot with that. That's fine. Thank you. So, Dorothy.
My question is that if you get, like, for instance, for example, children which are looked after have opportunities to go to any school because they're looked after children. But if you get a child who wishes to go to, say, for instance, which they deem as a successful school, but they can't afford the travel arrangements to get there, i.e. The buses, is there a mechanism at NNC in the future whereby they will help these children go to these schools by financing the bus fares?
Dorothy, are you predominantly talking about looked after children?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about any child. So any child who wants, at the moment, looked after children are able to go to any school. However, what I'm saying is the children outside that looked after, would they be able to go to any school? But if they can't afford to go there because they can't afford the bus fares, is there a mechanism whereby we can help them go to that school and finance the bus fares?
So, home to school transport. So we have a home to school transport policy, and we do support children to travel to school. Now, as you know, parents are able to express a preference for any school within the area, or up to 3 schools through the admissions process. However, if they express a preference for a school that's further away than a school that could offer them a place, then they wouldn't get transport for that. So if your local school had places and you as a parent chose to apply for a school some distance away, our home to school transport policy wouldn't fund that, because we as the local authority have a responsibility to offer a school place, and we can do that within the local area, and the parent has chosen not to take that by selecting another school. So I think the answer to your question is no, not if we're able to offer them a place, because then it's a parental choice rather than a local authority choice. And when parents are making their preference of school places, it's one of the things they have to consider. I understand your question about parents. You know, there are very many reasons why parents would express a preference for a different school, you know, which may be about, you know, their perception of that school, or their history with that school or siblings at that school and all sorts of things like that. But no, that's not reflected in the homeschool transport policy. The homeschool transport policy that is there to transport pupils where we're unable to deliver a local place to meet their needs, or in some circumstances, and as you will imagine, particularly in rural areas where the school nearest that can offer a space is actually more than 2 miles or 3 miles, whatever the distance criteria is within North Hatch. Apologies again, I don't know off the top of my head, but it comes in at that point as well. And there is some element, obviously, for supporting those disadvantaged pupils within that set of arrangements as well. So I think the answer to the question is there is a homeschool transport policy, but it doesn't support parental choice of any school within the area. It supports us making an offer of education to every child.
Can I follow up with a question, please?
Yes, Dorothy.
Given we live in a democratic society, is there any mileage in going back to the DFE and requesting some sort of financial help? I know where you're coming from, in so much that, you know, parents request to go, maybe their child to go to a particular school. I was thinking, if you look at needs more children because it's out in the sticks. If there was some mechanism which the government would finance these children, and see.
Dorothy, you did freeze a little bit there. I think basically you were asking, is there some sort of system to ask the DfE for funding?
No, if we as NNC requested the DfE to maybe give us some financial aid to help these parents who, in a democratic society, should have choices about which child the school should go to. Could we go back to the DfE and ask them this question?
So, if it's okay, Chair, I'll respond to that, which is home to school transport is a local authority responsibility. So we fund it out of our general funding, fund. It doesn't come out of the dedicated schools grant or any of those school related grants, because it's our responsibility to ensure parents are able to access a school, and that's what we do, and where we can't do that. We can do that. The other thing I'd say, of course, is that we have to be careful with our wording here, in that parents are able to express a preference of school. They're not able to choose a school because, of course, the admissions policy for that school, you know, may not be able to accommodate their selection. So they can express preferences, up to 3 preferences through the admissions process. I don't know what the DfE's response would be if we wanted to talk to them about, you know, additional funding for transport on a different basis. But I imagine the response would be, it's your local authority's homeschool transport policy. You can write it however you would like to write it, and the funding of that is your responsibility. I think that would be the most likely answer to that. But who knows?
And is there a possibility of doing that, do you think?
That would be a member decision to take a view as to whether you wanted to review the homeschool transport policy as it is. And I have to say, the homeschool transport budget doesn't sit within the children's services budget. It sits within another budget within the council. So whilst I'm aware of it and speak regularly with my colleagues in that area, you have to speak to them about the details of what that looks like, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not on the forward plan, Dorothy, at the moment.
It sits within the police budget, Chair.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Lee.
Thanks, Chairman. So this is probably a really daft question, but I'm just trying to bring myself fully up to speed for the reasons we do some of these. So 5.1, where we're talking about changing the published admission numbers and reducing them down, because clearly there is a reduced number of students, of pupils wanting to go to those schools. What's the benefit to reducing them? Why not just leave them as they are? Is it for funding or just for accuracy?
Okay, so there are a number of reasons for that. One, and often the main reason, is that if let's say a school has a PAN of 60, and we're anticipating that they're going to meet below 30. They still have to be prepared to open a second class, particularly infants age group, because of the infant school class size requirements. They'd have to have 30 in a class. If they went to 31, they'd suddenly have to open a whole new class and have a whole new teacher and those sorts of things. And so if we're confident that that is unlikely to happen, that takes away that risk and allows them to financially plan much more accurately going into the future, because they know they'll be running one class and there isn't the possibility that they're going to tip over slightly into requiring another class and then tip back out of that again potentially. So it is a financial stability issue, but equally it's about ensuring at a place level, so taking a step back, the local authority's responsibility for school organisation is, are there enough places within an area, not within one individual school, but in a town or in a district or whatever planning area that we want to look at. And so you balance that across the piece. School organisation is often described as an art rather than a science, because it's so impacted by parental choice. Somebody earlier spoke about demographic changes in the population. If you've got an area that is, the average age is increasing and there are no children, or many fewer children requiring a school place, that has to be built into that. Building new houses have to be built into it, and all those sorts of things. So it's the bringing together of lots of elements that says, okay, what do we need for the area and what's best for the school, but most importantly, what's best for the families and the pupils attending those schools, that gives us a sustainable and resilient system that we're managing. So in the main, this is about changes in demography, changes in demand, leading to us wanting to have strong and resilient schools that can financially plan as certainly as they can.
Perfectly logical. No, thanks for that. Now I understand.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie and Neil, for that. Neil, it was just Neil. So item 6 is the forward plan of executive items. Ben.
Thank you, and apologies if there's a noise of traffic. I'm by a main road and there's no double glazing. So in terms of the forward plan, the executive forward plan, there aren't any items for children's services, so I'd propose to go straight on to our own forward list of items on the following agenda item, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine, thank you.
Okay.
I thought there was some items on the forward plan though for executive.
Tennyson Road and Alfred Street should be on there, Chair.
Yes, and I think, if I remember rightly, free school meals, was that on there as well? And the admissions policy, I think, as well.
Yeah, that is my understanding.
Yeah, thank you.
So the first two are already on our forward plan, and I just need to add the free school meals to that as well.
Okay.
So if I just share our internal forward plan. Okay, so there's a number of items which we discussed at the last meeting, which need to be scheduled in. So we've got an update on SEN, Youth Justice Plan updates, homeschooled children briefing, presentation on prospects, and we will also need, subject to the decision of the executive on the Alfred Street Tennyson Road consultation, we'll also need to schedule in further consideration of, during or just prior to the second consultation stage. So we need to add that. Is it best for me to discuss directly with Anne-Marie and Neil sort of when best to schedule these items in?
Yeah, that's That's fine, because I mean, I have regular meetings with Anne-Marie about what we're including and things, so and when. So yeah, I'm happy with that if you are, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I just wondered, I was going to say, Chair, with your permission, if we could, sorry, Ben, if you could scroll up again so I can just see what the SEN one was. We will be taking more detailed work to the schools forum on SEN in March. I understand. I'm looking for a nod of agreement from Neil there. Yeah, I wonder if potentially we could bring something back, therefore, Chair, in either on the March one or the May one on SEN and give more detail there. I know there's some specific questions on there, but I think we could probably cover those off in line with some of the work we're proposing to take to the schools forum. And I think for completeness and for members to understand that and understand it at the same time as the schools forum are receiving that information, I think would be beneficial to councillors.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Anne-Marie. I think if we can link it all in together, because I mean, I'm sure you all agree that SEN is a huge issue. So it is one that absolutely. So if we put that in for the 23rd of March, that would be great, Ben.
Yeah.
If we could scroll down, Ben, as well, and potentially put some dates on these while we're here. The Youth Justice Plan update, Chair, it has been here fairly in recent months, I think.
Yeah, so we had it in, I think it was October, actually, because it went to executive in October. So I know it's
so there's annual consideration here at the EAP before it goes to executive and full council.
Yeah,
I think this was more. I think members wanted a bit of a sort of mid-year update prior to the new Youth Justice Plan coming in the autumn.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Chair, if I might be so bold, the Youth Offending Service, I think Debbie, when she was here, mentioned that the Youth Offending Service are expecting an inspection at any time. Yes. What I would respectfully request, if we can hang fire on an update, because what I wouldn't want to do is put additional pressure on the service to produce an in-year update whilst they're potentially preparing for inspection.
Absolutely. I would agree with you, Anne-Marie, and I think you're absolutely right. We could actually put it on the agenda after they've had their inspection, and then actually we can have a look at that inspection as well.
Fab. Thank you, Chair. Homeschool children, I think I'd be happy to bring homeschool children in March, because otherwise, at the minute, we've got nothing on there for March. And that's not the reason I'm saying it, but I think in terms of homeschool children, that's worth us having a look at that point, Chair.
Yeah, so are you okay with the 2nd of March for that one? Because we've got SEN on the 23rd, haven't we? So
I have to admit that I am on annual leave then, but I'm more than happy that Neil will be more than capable with Imtiaz Bhatti, I think, for homeschool children.
Yeah, no, I think Neil has presented extremely well this evening. So yeah, I'd agree with you on that as well.
You can send that to corporate compliments, I think, Neil.
Okay.
And then prospects, again, I'm happy to pick that up with the trust, because I know that the prospects contract is sitting with the trust. We can pick that up and we can get an idea about when they want to bring that forward, Chair, if that's all right.
Absolutely. Yeah, superb. Thank you.
Okay, and as I said, I'll also schedule in the free school meals item.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Now, is there anything anybody else would like to see on future lists moving forward? Dorothy, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yes, I'm sort of slightly concerned about Rowan Gate Special School in the Hayway, and it also operates in Wellingborough, but it now has 2 classrooms at Tennyson Road as well. So I was wondering if there was a possibility of discussing what way forward is there going to be for schools like Rowan Gate, which is bursting at the seams.
Chair, if we could cover that in the 23rd of March when we look at SEN, that it would be appropriate to cover that in that meeting. The other point, and I know this is not all about me, so sorry, but the other item I'd like to add to the forward plan, Chair, with yours and members' approval is an item on maintained nursery schools, and I think it would be advisable to have a conversation around that on the 23rd of March as well, if that would be appropriate. I would say sooner, but I'd like to participate in that conversation, so my preference would be to the 23rd of March.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is an item going to the schools forum, isn't there? Is at the end of February. So yeah, if we bring it to the end of March to us, absolutely, then we can have a discussion around that as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Which leads me to close the meeting at, I can't see my clock, there we are, at nearly 6:30. Thank you very much for your attendance today. I think it's been a very good evening, and we'll see you all soon.
Can I just ask how we get to the next meeting?
So there should be a separate link, Dorothy, that you've been sent.